One moment. Okay. All right, so for anyone who's not currently an STC-PMC member, here's just a little bit of background about who we are and what we do. STC is the Society for Technical Communication. It's a professional organization for technical communicators. There's a few examples of what technical communicators are here on the screen. Technical writers and editors, translators, content strategists, web designers, includes all these different kinds of jobs. And the PMC is the Philadelphia Metro chapter, which is our local chapter for southeastern Pennsylvania, which also includes South Jersey and parts of Delaware. And here's a little bit more about some of the different areas that we cover. This is just a small portion of the neighborhoods in the Philadelphia area. We welcome everybody from all over. All different kinds of technical communicators can join. And we are looking for members. So if you're not a member, here's some good reasons why you should become a member. You can meet other technical communicators in your area. Right now, we're all virtual, of course, but we do have in-person events when we can. So you can meet other technical communicators in your area, network, socialize, hang out. We have an exclusive job board, which is very helpful if you're trying to get into technical communication. And we also have a certification, the Certified Professional Technical Communicator, which you can use to show off your skills. And you can learn new skills at our different courses and webinars. And you can also keep up with the latest in technical communication with our website and our publications and social media and everything. And of course, be part of the cool crowd like these cool people here and make your friends jealous. If you're interested in joining, you can go to stc.org. Just remember to pick the Philadelphia Metro chapter when you're checking out for your membership. Also, right now, if you join before December 31st, you'll be entered to win a $25 Amazon gift card, which is basically covering the cost of your chapter membership back in Amazon goodies. So you can use that to get anything you want in the magical world of Amazon. So make sure you join before December 31st. And again, don't forget to select the Philadelphia Metro chapter. We are also looking for a treasurer. We need a treasurer as soon as possible. And if you're wondering, do you have to be an accountant? Do you have to have accounting skills? The answer is no. If you know how to balance a checkbook, you can be our treasurer. And there's a lot of great reasons to volunteer. It looks great on your resume. You can gain some valuable career skills. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. It's a virtual position. And you can also help us to keep being an awesome chapter. So if you're interested, you can send me an email, president@stcpmc.org. And also we have our outgoing treasurer who will be available to help you out, help you learn the ropes. And you know we're going to have great documentation explaining how to do the job because that's what we do. We're technical communicators. Okay, so in just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers who are going to give a little bit of background about how they got into technical writing. And once they've all given their presentations, we will have a Q&A session where you can ask questions and all of our speakers will be able to answer them. You can ask about their careers, you can ask about getting into technical writing, anything related to it. And if you have questions now or during the presentations, feel free to enter them in the chat and we'll look over them and have our experts answer them once they finish presenting. So give me one moment here to get set up. Our first speaker is Lori Corbett.
Hi, y'all. Can you hear me?
Yes, I just made you a presenter, so you should be able to share your camera and screen now.
I'm going to share that screen. Did you? Yep, you're seeing it. I'm not. You are.
I see it.
Good. And my notes. So I've been a member of STC since 1988, but I've been a member of the working public since 1976 when I graduated college. It all started there at Barnard College in New York City. In those days, Columbia did not accept women, and I had a 50% scholarship, but it did not pay for me to live on campus. So I had to work. I got a job at the Columbia Spectator doing typesetting. And in those days, so I would work on the daily paper, and it would start at 6 in the evening, and it would end between 2 and 6 in the morning. And we would go to breakfast at Tom's Restaurant. Now, you may recall this restaurant, having seen it on Seinfeld. It was called Monk's Cafe, but that was Tom's Restaurant they were using, and I knew it well. But typesetting in the 70s was, if you'll notice the blue ribbon paper, that was what my keyboard would punch the holes into that paper, and I actually learned how to read those hole punches. I had absolutely no display on the keyboard. It was very similar to this one that you see here. And then I would put that tape into a machine, and out would come film. And the film went through a waxer and got manually set up by the paste-up artist. I didn't do the paste-up artist part. I was busy doing the typesetting. You did codes to make it move around different ways. It was an introduction to basic coding and knowing how to set up paragraphs and lists, numbered lists, bulleted lists, before word processing existed, because remember, this is the mid-70s. And then I finished school and I was looking for work, but I had a degree in economics. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I became an assistant editor at Academic Press. I had a lot of math, and I had my degree in economics. So I was a math and economics assistant editor. And it was mostly working with men and women who wrote college texts. So I didn't do any writing, and I was just like corralling these people to do their writing. And it wasn't very challenging, and it didn't pay very well. But typesetting in New York was a well-paid position. So I said, I know how to do this. I'm going to typeset. So I went to work for a company, and at that company, we did the Consumer Electronics Show and I forgot the name of the magazine. It was an audio magazine. And then I got to go to the Consumer Electronics Show, and this was my seatmate on the airplane because we didn't dare pack it. I got to travel with my IBM Selectric Composer, which is a sort of a mini typesetting machine, and I would type onto paper that had a clay coating, so it would actually scratch into that coating, and you could read it. And then as we moved into the early 80s, we got machines with displays. Hallelujah. And this is probably the beginning of what became word processing, because you could actually see what you were doing. Sometimes you would just see code, usually couldn't see how it was going to lay out. And this machine to the left, there we go. This machine to the left of the keyboard, that was where the film was processed. So we processed film. It was kind of fun. I got to learn a lot. It was electronic stuff. It was consumer electronics, whatever the newest and greatest things were. I can't remember what they were at the time. It was like when Apples first came out, Mac first came out, things like that in the early 80s. And it was a lot of fun. I got to learn about visual white space and things we use in technical communication. So then I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. And in Charlotte, North Carolina, they did not pay well for typesetters. It was minimum wage. I said, I can't do this. So I went to work at a company that did typesetting and printing. And I became the office manager there. And I would, this is a picture of a printing press, one of the really old ones. And working with those guys was definitely an awakening experience because they were kind of tough, just a little. Then in 1987, I went back to typesetting for a company. Oh, that's the end of that. Okay, I can stop sharing. Yeah. Stop sharing. Here we go. I went to work for a company that did typesetting for IBM. When I was working there, they were doing the technical writing. I was doing the typesetting, and I was constantly fixing stuff as it came across because they would make errors and all kinds of things. And I wrote a conversion program for what they were doing there. It was like preliminary word processing. They used a language called ISIL. IBM, it was an internal structured IBM language. And I wrote a conversion program for the typesetter, and they would actually be able to pass that over to me, and I could run the typesetter with it. And then they brought in an editing professor from the local community college to give everybody some grammar. And they gave us all a test. And I was the typesetter. I said, can I take the class? And they said, sure. So I took the class, and I scored best on the test of everybody at the company, even those who had been writing for 10 years or more. But they wouldn't promote me. So I left. And I started doing contract work, and I joined STC in 1988. One of the best things I did was help W.T. Harris. If anybody's from the South, you know of Harris Teeter supermarkets. And W.T. Harris was the gentleman who was the Harris of Harris Teeter. And I helped him write his autobiography, which he wrote for his grandchildren. It was never published. And then I went to work as a writer for Broadway and Seymour, which did a lot of things about automatic teller machines, which were called personal banking machines, and things like that. And that company later merged with Arthur Andersen. But as a member of STC, I got very involved. You know, here's a plug for somebody who might think about being treasurer. I've done probably every job in a chapter. When I worked in Charlotte, when I moved to Florida, when I've moved up here, I've been president of 2 of those chapters. When I first started, I did the newsletters because I knew about typesetting and word processing. And the chapter won an award for their newsletters. And I got active. So that's how I got started with writing. I started doing the newsletters. People got to know me. It's a great network to be known in STC. I can tell you that my current position at Vertex, I was laid off from the bank. They were reducing headcount. And I went to an STC party at Karen's house, actually. Yeah, remember that? At Karen's house, and Don DeBoard was there. And I'd known Don DeBoard since I'd moved to Pennsylvania in 2002. And he said, what's new? I said, well, I just got laid off. And he goes, come on. You're coming with me. So I basically walked from being laid off to my current position. And it's all history from there. And that's my story. I became a technical writer and editor. Obviously, I have a pretty good editing background. I know a few foreign languages, and I understand grammar. I always say I learned my grammar when I took Latin in junior high school.
All right. Thank you very much. And I'm going to introduce our next speaker in just a moment while I get everything switched over. Okay, so our next speaker is going to be Tim Esposito. And I'm going to switch over to him. All right, Tim, you are now a presenter. You should be able to share your screen. We can't hear you, though.
Is it sharing my screen already?
Oh, there you are. Yeah, I see you and hear you now.
Okay, so you see some desert or something?
Yep.
Okay. I don't have a fancy slideshow like Lori because I'm a bad technical communicator. So, so some background. I've been professionally a technical communicator since about 2000, although that's just when the title started reflecting that. I've been doing stuff like this for years before that. So when I was in college, I had a job in the computer lab, because what else do you do when you're a history and English major and you're looking for a job? So you start working with computers. And most of that was helping people print things and putting toner in the printer and that kind of stuff. But there was this new technology back in the 90s called email. And email was tricky because in order to access it, you had to use these green screen terminals because the school was not exactly cutting edge. And everything was using a Unix-based email system. So there were two. There was one called Elm and there was one called Pine. And they were both command line kind of email programs like DOS, and they didn't use the regular keys because they used the Vi editor, which is a Unix type editor. And someone taught me how to use that, and then I was able to teach everyone how to use email and wrote up my own instructions. And one of the people on the staff said, hey, this is really great. We're going to use a Windows email now. Can you write up instructions for that too? So I wrote up a page of how to use the email program from Windows. And they took it and made copies of it and gave it out to all the professors on campus to hand out to the students. And they took my copyright information off the bottom of it, unfortunately, so I get no credit for that. But I'm like, hey, I'm pretty good at doing instructions. So I taught myself how to do HTML, which at the time was a relatively new concept. And I created my own college website, which was a list of links, and which is what all the websites were. And it was enough to get noticed by someone else in the school because they recommended me for a job for a webmaster. And this was a webmaster for a major hospital in Philadelphia as a paid internship. So voila, I found on the Internet Archive the 1997 edition of McGee Rehabilitation Hospital's website that I was the webmaster for. And I think there was more pictures and stuff that did not get saved by this Internet Archive, but it's what every website back then looked like. Oh, look, there's a counter at the bottom. 1,000 people looked at my website. 1,000, think of that. And it's just a list of links. Where else can you go? Button, 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 link, 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 link. And oh, look, little gemstone buttons that you can sort of click on and find out what's new. I don't even know if these work. Yeah, beautiful gray, grainy background. And I connected to this by using a dial-up modem in the hospital to connect through Prodigy or AOL or something like that, 14.4 megabits per second or whatever it was for the dial-up. So this began my career in web stuff. And when I graduated, all of the jobs that I applied to do were all computer technology-based jobs. And the first job that I took was, and we don't have to keep looking at this horrible website, please don't, was at a company called SCT, not to be confused with STC, which I still screw up when I talk to people from that old job. And I did tech support, which is what I was doing on the in the computer lab, and that was great. And then that transitioned to me being a consultant, and I was on the road teaching people how to do stuff. But it was really all technical communication, because I would go to a customer site, and in that company we made software for the process industry, so baking cookies, mixing chemicals, big factory stuff where ingredients go in and then something non-recognizable comes out, often a food product. And I spent the better part of 1999 in an aluminum processing plant in Louisville, Kentucky. And all I was doing was creating flows and diagrams and taking roles of the people in their jobs that they've been doing for 30 years in a manufacturing plant and transferring that knowledge into how does it model in a computer system. And by the time I was done with that, I said, you know, I've had enough doing this stuff on the phone and having the angry customer call up and say, oh, why is this not working and it crashed on me? You need to get me fixed right now. I said, I am going to get a job not doing this. And I've been teaching a training class and developing that. So I went to the boss of that team and said, can I come work for you? And there was a new position, and she interviewed me and hired me. And that began my actual career in technical communication. So I've been documenting software since then. That company has since been swallowed up, and I now work at Oracle, where I will show you instead of that loveliness. Yeah, notice how nice and clean this is. And this is an Oracle template. This is a site that I'm in charge of for the documentation. And I don't control the look or the feel. I just fill in what the links are supposed to go to. And then we have the books page, and I publish all of these books. I'm not the author of all the content, but I curate it. And they have this wonderful system that we're using now that's DITA. And prior to this, everything was in Word and just PDFs. But PDFs are not accessible, and to meet government standards, you need to have accessible documentation. So my team converted everything out of Word into Oxygen as the XML editor, and we use DITA, which is the XML standard for authoring, one of the standards for authoring. And I don't have that to show you here. This is my personal computer, but we upload that into a server, and when we push a button, it generates the output. And the output is either an Acrobat that looks all corporate-y branding, and look, there's the new color scheme that they thought was awesome last year. And I just put the words in. I don't have to worry about the formatting or anything. They take care of the colors, all that stuff. And then there's an HTML version. And again, it's the content that I provide, so I make sure the words are there. But they string it all together into this searchable HTML output. And if they want to change this from being this size font to something else, they do that. I don't have to do anything. I just have the files uploaded, and when the output is generated, it's all there. So from there, I started doing STC volunteering as opposed to SCT volunteering. And Steve Lundgren, who was the president, said, Tim, I think you're going to make a great chapter president. And I said, Steve, I've been a member of the chapter for 8 months. I don't know about this. He's like, no, trust me. You got this, Tim. I said, okay, I'll run for chapter president against Lori Corbett, who went, oh, no, you're not going to be president. And she came in and she became president. But she was very smart in that she made good use of the volunteers that were there, and she roped me into starting a scholarship program. So she got me hooked, and I ran that scholarship program for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years until that program was canceled. And then the new president said, Tim, we really need you to be a treasurer. And I'm like, well, I can balance a checkbook. And he said, that's all you need to do, balance a checkbook. I'm like, I can do that. And I was a treasurer for 5 years. And then I was vice president, then the president/secretary, and now I'm on the STC board as the secretary for the society. So the trick to this business is having sucker written across your forehead in big bold letters, not knowing to stop volunteering, and to be able to take information and display it in a way that other people can understand it. You need to be organized. You need to know where you're going with things. You need to know how people need to work with it. So that's my recurring theme, volunteer way too much. This is my 3rd STC call for the day. So that's it. Peace out.
All right, thanks, Tim. And just give me one moment to get over to our next presenter, who is going to be Karen Levine, who's actually our current treasurer. So if you volunteer for treasurer, you get to work with her. She's really cool. Let me see. Karen, oh, you're on the president account, I think. Okay, Karen, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have any slides to share, so
That's okay.
I don't know that there's
Neither
any
did I.
point in sharing my screen. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Karen Levine. I am the acting treasurer for the chapter. I have previously been the secretary membership chair, the vice president. I was the regular treasurer last year, and I've been a mentor program chair, and I've been on the competition committees and done all kinds of different things, both for this chapter and also for the New York Metro chapter. I began my career at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, actually. I wasn't a technical writer back then. I went through a 4-year electronics apprenticeship and worked on shipboard electronic systems for several years, and in a variety of different types of things, from computer systems to radar systems to data systems and communication systems and a bunch of other things like that. And that was very interesting. I learned a lot of different things. And when I was finished on the ships, I moved to a different activity, still with the Navy, but I was supporting Navy pilots instead with a computer system that they used. So I did all kinds of things, from system integration to some purchasing and logistics work and editing for the user and service manuals and training materials, until I got into management there. And I ended up being the deputy support manager for naval mission planning for the Navy and the Marine Corps. But after a while, after about 20 years, I thought, this has been fun, but I think I need to do something different. And my favorite part of the job was all of the writing that I did, whether it was writing reports or newsletters or things like that. That's the part that I enjoyed the most. So I went to a career counselor, and I took a bunch of tests, and realized, and she suggested, based on my interests, that I try technical communication. So it sounded like fun to me, since I had a technical background. So I went to Drexel, and I got my my master's degree in their tech comm program. So I've been actually holding the title of a technical writer, or some version of that, since I finished grad school in 2002. And I work currently for a medical device company here in Pennsylvania, and I've been a technical writer and a project manager, and I'm currently the manager of a small group of technical writers for our neonatal care department. So we write user manuals and other documents for labor and delivery and neonatal intensive care unit equipment, like incubators and warming beds and phototherapy equipment and things like that. Right now, we started out just using unstructured FrameMaker back in, when I started there in 2002, and we've done that, and we still do that for some of our older documents. We've moved into structured FrameMaker, and in the last 5 years into a content management system that it's a German company and so no one here has ever heard of it, but it's called TimRS. And so that's an XML-based system that uses structured FrameMaker and does a lot of publishing. So we have the ability to create documentation in all different kinds of formats based on the modules that are created that we can reuse. So that's really the newest thing that we're doing. some of the things when I first started, back when I was back in the mid to late 80s, when I was working for the Navy, when I first started supporting the Navy pilots, we had just gotten our first computers, desktop computers in the office. So I was learning to use that, and we had dot matrix printers and very uncolorful display screens on our computers. I think it was all a black screen with yellow text. So that was, it was quite a difference back then from what we have today. There's really no comparison. But that's what I've done. I've had a lot of fun volunteering for STC. I joined STC and I wasn't active for the first few years. And I went to the New York Metro chapter for a seminar, a training seminar that they had for a couple of days. And I met the then president, Malou Schloss, and she roped me into working with them on their competition. And so I was working as an entries manager on the competition for a few years, and then I met some of the people in Philadelphia from going to some meetings, and became active in the local chapter. And then we joined the competition to make it a regional one, and so we've continually been adding chapters along the way as the competitions have changed and chapters have combined and merged. But it's been very rewarding. I've learned a lot. I've made a lot of great friends and contacts in STC, both in the chapter and also nationally. I love to go to the summit. Unfortunately, it was canceled this year. But in the past, I've gone, not every year, but quite a few years. And I've met lots of great people, and it's a great place to learn about new technologies and about different volunteer opportunities. And so that's my story.
All right. Oh, it was virtual. Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Thanks, Karen. So our next speaker is going to be Ellen O'Brien. As soon as I get her switched over. One moment. There she is. Okay, Ellen, you should be ready to go. Are you there? Oh, okay.
Can you
I see
hear me
something.
now?
Yep, there you are.
Okay. And I can't tell in GoToMeeting. Can you see a screen?
Yes, I see your screen.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I think Lori wins the prize for the most what's the word I'm trying to think of? Circuitous route to tech writing. That was quite a story. I am Ellen O'Brien. I wouldn't say that my path into technical communication is completely unexpected, but for me, it was kind of like serendipity because it wasn't what I was looking for. People that I work with now, people that I've hired in recent years, come out of tech comm programs, and they know that's what they want to do. Those kinds of programs weren't very common. I'm not even sure if they existed when I graduated, but I didn't have any slides ready. And as everyone else started showing things, I thought, okay, I'm just going to open a few windows here. So I got a BS in communications from Miami University in Ohio in the early 80s. And as I say, when I did some mass communications, I did audio, video, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with that degree, but I was thinking most likely something down the PR path or, editorial, magazine work, whatever. And it just so happened that the summer before my senior year, I wanted to live with my older sister who lived in Atlanta at the time. Didn't know what I was going to do. I started applying for jobs and wanted to be in Atlanta. That's all I knew. It happened at that time that IBM was in the habit of just hiring college students for, you know, and if you were lucky, you might wind up in a department that had something to do with your area of study. Otherwise, it was just like a social outreach thing they did. You'd have these bunch of college students and you might be working in just an office job. I got very fortunate and I actually worked for an information development, I think they were called, group in Atlanta. And I didn't know what that was, but I spent a whole summer doing it, learning from it. So by the time I was graduating, again, wasn't 100% convinced that's what I wanted to do. But what I found as I started my job search, the computer industry pays much better than anything in PR or editorial. You know, come out of college, you're like an editorial assistant. I'm like, oh, this software company is going to pay me how much? I'm there, you know. I see some of you smiling and you've had that experience. So again, I took that as my first step, not really recognizing that it was what was meant to be, but it was a good place to start. And as it turned out, after I would say a few years anyway, it occurred to me that I had gotten lucky again in finding this path, because it was a very good match between my writing skills and my, for lack of a better phrase, my analytical mind. I'm a writer, but I'm not naturally a creative writer or marketing writer. What I do is I have an analytical mind. I can explain things. You know, I can break down pieces of information. So it turned out to be the right career path because it fit even before I knew what I was good at. It fit there. So I showed you where I came from. The company that I started with out of school was within a few years acquired by what was then known as Computer Associates, now CA Technologies, owned even by someone else. Was there for a few years. I've been through so many layoffs. Mostly I survived, but just to have witnessed them is a badge that nobody should have. I was in a situation where I was a supervisor and had to lay people off at Computer Associates, but all through this, I was a tech writer, and I became, you know, more well versed in what it meant to be a tech writer. Funny anecdote, if you will. I remember my first manager, who was by no means a writer himself. He was a development manager, and he hired me because I seemed like a sharp kid out of college. And we were having some conversation about some writing assignment, something I was working on. And he starts drawing in the air. And he's basically trying to correct something that I was writing. And he's diagramming the sentence. And I said, Joe, please don't fire me, but I've never diagrammed a sentence in my life. He had come through like Catholic grammar school, where that was the way you learned, right? I have always been more of just an instinctive and natural, you know, just don't ask me to diagram my sentences is all I'm saying. After CA, I went to another, again, this is mainframe software primarily, so really old school stuff compared to what's being done nowadays. And then I spent many years of my career with a company that's called BMC Software, based in Houston, Texas. Again, I was with a company that got acquired by BMC. So the evolution of your career, you never know where you start and where that might lead, either because you change or because someone comes along and, you know, vacuums you up. But they've all been really good experiences. I've had opportunities at various points in my career to supervise, to manage writers and editors. And as I mentioned, having the unhappy experience of living through layoffs, laying people off myself. In 2015, I was myself laid off from BMC. Was in the job market for 10 months, and STC was really critical to me at that point. Karen Levine was a great resource to me. Tim has always had a lot of really great advice. In the end, I wound up with a company that's based in the King of Prussia area called Boomi. And this was a whole new experience for me in terms of the type of software. But what I've learned in my career is that inherent in being a technical writer is learning new things. It's just what we do. And you have to want to learn new things. You know, I'm never going to be the deep dive subject matter expert in any one of these things, but I'm curious enough and interested enough to want to learn about that new technology or that new program and to talk to people about it. You know, technical communication is much more than just writing. It really involves a lot of interpersonal communication, interviewing, a little bit of backstroking to get what you need sometimes. So it's kind of an all-around communication profession. And then, having been with Boomi since 2016, my career took an interesting turn about a year and a half ago. I'm actually not doing any technical writing anymore. I had the opportunity to become a manager, a first-line manager of a product team. So I'm using those skills, but I would also argue that it's still a communication job, that some of my peer managers who got where they are from being a programmer or a tester or whatever are good at what they do, but they don't have some of the soft skills that we've built up over the years in being communications professionals. So that's what I'm doing currently. I manage a small team of programmers and testers and a tech writer and a UX designer, kind of a complete product group. But I've really never lost my, you know, my heart is with tech writing. And there must be something about being treasurer, because I've also been the treasurer of this chapter. I've worked the competition with Karen, the mentoring program. There's just a lot of opportunities. I think that, Tim, maybe it was you who said, you always get more out of volunteering than you actually give. If you're thinking, oh, I don't have time, you know, oh, it's going to take time, you'd be amazed. You know, it's a little bit of time, but what you get back, you know, threefold is certainly worth that. So, and that's my story, as Karen said.
All right, thank you. And we are going to have one more speaker in just a moment, who is Matt Reiner.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, let me make you a presenter in just a moment. Just got to find you on the list. There you are. Okay, now you should be able to share your screen if you want to.
All right, yeah, let me do that. It doesn't actually, I'm trying to share the screen, but the button doesn't do anything. That's very odd. Would you mind maybe removing me as a presenter and try adding me again? Permissions button. Okay, wow, okay, we're here. All right, there we go. So, hi everybody, my name is Matt Reiner. I was excited to hear that we were going to talk about non-traditional career paths, because that is exactly what I'm qualified to talk about. So my path, I wanted to start with where I am today. So actually my title currently is customer advocate, which I'm not really a title person. I think, you know, we get hung up on them too much, and they're sort of meaningless, especially in the realm of technical communication. You'll certainly learn that. Your title doesn't necessarily mean you are or are not a technical communicator. But it's really, you know, I really love my role right now. I work for a small German software company called K15T, and we actually make software for Confluence. If you've ever used Confluence before, it's a company-wide wiki, and so our apps actually add a layer on top of Confluence so that you can do tech writing in it. And I actually met my team because I was a user of their apps for several years, you know, tech writing in them. So, jumped on board with this company, and now I get to talk with tech writers and, as along with doing tech writing myself, talk with tech writers, see, what's good about our apps, what's not, go to the different product teams that I get to be a part of and see how we can improve them. It's really been a phenomenal experience, but not one, that I planned at all. So I wanted to jump back a little bit. So first, to 2018, which is when I, found this current job that I'm in, that I'm really like, I dare say loving. But just like to let everybody know, you're not necessarily going to love your job all the time. So going back to 2008, this is the best picture of myself I could find. Yeah, it's like, who's that baby who has such terrible clothes? Yeah, so 2008, I was still in school, and I like to call this the I have no clue what I'm doing period of my life. I remember my dad is a critical care nurse, and I remember him saying, like, son, like, if you can stand to be around, people who have health issues, there's lots of money to be made. And, not that life is about money, but think about it. And then I almost passed out in this medical exhibit at a museum. So I was like, okay, what is the farthest away from, organic tissue I can get? And it was like, okay, technology, nothing in technology bleeds, so I'll go with that. So I started studying computer science. Again, no real idea what I'm going to do with that. I just knew, there wouldn't be any people to take care of necessarily, and computers are cool, right? So that was actually where I came across my first like real job, other than mowing people's lawns and things. And it was actually, I became a peer tutor. We had this little learning center at this community college where I did my first few years. And I don't know what I was thinking, because the main subjects that were tutored were, science, like a chemistry or biology, math, and English. And entering, I was very poor at math, and I never considered myself a writer at all. Like, I do remember diagramming sentences a bit, but I couldn't do it now. Like, I couldn't do it in 2008. But then all of a sudden, I'm sitting down with people, tutoring them on these things. And luckily, I had some really great math teachers that helped me like realize, like, oh, I'm a technical mind. I actually enjoy this whole math thing. And then the English thing, like realizing, like, oh, hey, I can kind of put some thoughts together, and I know what good grammar looks like, but I don't know why it looks that way. So, don't ask me too much about grammar. But one of the things that my manager there told me was, our job is not to be teachers. That's the professor's job. They're the teachers. They're the ones who say, this is the correct way, you're either doing it or you're not. Our job as tutors was to connect people with the resources around them. That was the mantra that she would repeat. And so, rather than sitting down and telling someone, here's why your math problem is wrong, or here's why, the way you've structured your thesis is wrong, instead, you had to sort of dive into explaining what's happening there, explain all the way around it, so that the person you're tutoring can draw the conclusion, oh, here's what I need to do. So that, I really looked to that as the start of technical communication, but I didn't know it. So trace forward a little bit, I go from a community college to the University of Pittsburgh, a campus in northern Pennsylvania, where I'm pursuing my bachelor's degree, and I'm also doing a bunch of internships, and I'm a technical assistant at the university. I like to call this the I'm a cog system in a larger system part of my life, because these were all very sort of menial tasks, in these internships that I'm doing. Like one was at an elementary school and a high school, and I remember I had this little cart, and I would wheel around every day with some degreaser and an air blower and clean out computers. That was my whole job. But also, I made myself really valuable because I built this database of every computer in the entire district that I had cleaned and serviced. So at the end of that internship, right, I could tell them how many machines do they have, how many, what are the operating systems, which ones have I cleaned, and so on. And I started to see, like, oh, that there's value in this information. I also started an internship at a networking company which was just really miserable work. I wasn't trained properly, but I really learned that I'm not necessarily special, which as a millennial, that's a really important lesson to learn, because for some reason, many of us came out thinking that we're special. So that was sort of like a, hey, I can do menial work, which is really helpful because some days in technical communication, you're just gonna do menial work. And then I got my first real job, actually coming out of that internship, with a networking company, communications company, that doesn't exist anymore. It was swallowed up by another, but that was once again, the no clue what I'm doing phase of my life, because I was a network planner. I was deploying networking equipment across the United States, and I had no idea what I was doing. Like, technically, I had taken some networking classes and I knew how networks work, but really I didn't know. I'm filling out templates for like configuring devices, and I would, send them out and just pray that everything works. But really the capabilities that I learned there was a lot of project management, and then a lot of writing, saying, okay, this connects to this, now run this, now do this. And then of course, network companies are just a sad conglomeration of many smaller network companies that they've purchased up. So there's a million old systems that don't talk to each other. So you have to, go over here and get this information, go over here and get that information, and bring it all together. So I learned a lot about bringing technical information together so that the consumer can read it and click on links and go to the thing they need without having to know the 80 different systems that are involved. I also learned that I don't ever want to work in a tech comm company again. And talk about layoffs. There were some really dark times that I survived through because I was the cheapest person on the team, because I was fresh out of college. So glad to have left that behind and entered the fun land of software development. So in 2016, I joined a software development team as, I think a project manager or something like that. There was no job description for the job. It was a small software team. They had just started writing a new application on the Salesforce platform. And initially I was brought in to administrate these tools called Jira. And then later I introduced Confluence, as well as to help, manage activities with the team. That's where I was really introduced to agile software development and became the team's Scrum Master. I did some product management work there, or I was a product owner. I even did some UI design, which, God bless the poor company that's working with that. I can't imagine that, that has aged well. But one of the things that happened while I was there, well, two things. One, this fantastic engineer who I think has been, developing technology since the dawn of everything. He introduced me to this thing called DITA, which was actually what Salesforce was using for their documentation. And so we started using it. And I really love the idea of this, module-based documentation that we can reuse content everywhere. I could just really see the power of, not just a dead document, but this thing that I can put together and combine, and then generate PDFs or websites. But the thing I hated was, like, our editor was so impossibly ugly and hard to use. And I would be working on a bulleted list, and then somehow bullet number 3 is, a totally wrong style. And it's like, what did I do? I had to jump into the XML. And also I had colleagues who wanted to contribute and review my content. And that was a really big sticking point for us, because with that database solution, I was the only one of the license. So that's why we moved initially to tech writing and Confluence. I was like, okay, there must be a way to do this, having, semi-structured content and content reuse and so on. And we figured that out. We figured out how to do that in Confluence, but also have the fantastic collaboration parts that come with a wiki like that. So then 2018, I joined my current company, but it wasn't just like stepping into this amazing role that I really love. I actually joined as a product marketing manager. So I actually reached out to them, as this American guy, like, hey, I use your apps and I think I could work remotely for you. I had actually done a lot of remote work with some of my other companies. And so I jumped into this marketing job. I thought that was maybe like a new new style of writing, you know, beyond the technical writing that I had been doing. And yes, I really liked that. Parts of it, especially introducing new concepts to people. This was around the time that I also realized I really enjoy speaking and communicating technical concepts, you know, in presentations. But I also realized, like, I'm not just a content generator. Like, I really like meaningful content, educational content. So I still do some marketing writing, but it's much more like I got to write a micro site for our company. So it's a marketing resource, but it's really like an introduction on how to do tech writing in Confluence. And that was just like the perfect marriage of the two for me. And that's when they also moved me into this customer advocate role, because they were like, look, we need to find what you love to do and not just you know, shove you into a role that we're trying to fill. And so that's been sort of an ongoing journey, right? And what it is I do changes from day to day, but I really love the tight connection to the technical communication world. And one thing I would just say, you know, I don't really know where my path is going to lead and what my title is going to be and whatever, although I really like this company, so I would expect that, you know, pretty long term. But every experience you have is a very important experience, even though at the time it feels maybe not that way. Even when you are laid off, you know, and you're in that job search land, which is a terrible place to be, it just, you know, can really grate on you. Each of these things, as I look back, I can see how they were instrumental in getting me to where I am right now in my technical communication role. So always focus on that. Even when you're in a role that you don't love, you're doing something you don't love, think about how is it growing you, or how can you grow in that? And a lot of that comes down to attitude. Yeah, so that's my story so far.
All right, thanks, Matt. And now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion in just a moment. Let me share my screen. All right, so if anyone has any questions, you can just enter them into the chat. And for any of our presenters or anything about getting started in technical communication. I can get us started off with a couple of questions that came up. One was, what was the most challenging thing about technical communication? Either the most challenging thing about starting your career or about what you're doing now. And anyone who can answer can just go ahead.
So I will offer one view. It wasn't about starting my career or anything specific I'm doing now. I would say some of the bigger challenges I've had were around dealing with the other people that you need information from. People in technical fields, not to stereotype, but many of them are not naturally communicators. They prefer to be coding or, you know, whatever. I've met a lot of wonderful people. They have the most interesting hobbies, people in this field. But sometimes you have to go more than 50% of the way in that communication exchange because you are able to. So that's something that comes to my mind.
I'd like to add to that as well. I've been, in any job that I've had, I've always gotten placed with the person who is least communicative as possible. So back in college, when I had that job in the computer lab, there was this guy who had this sort of dungeon office in the basement corner of the computer lab area. And he had, you know, the paper boxes, the printer paper comes in. He had a dozen of those. Each was completely filled with Magic the Gathering cards. This was his box of red cards. This was his box of black cards. These were packed to the ceiling in his office next to the old broken computers and stuff. So whenever something came up that was more technical and I had to work with that guy, all the other kids working with him were like, nope, Tim, you're doing it. You have to go do it. And I had a starter deck of Magic the Gathering, so I knew what the cards meant. and I could listen to him talk to me about that for hours. But building on that skill, different guy, but same personality at the job. Oh, you find out that he's really into something or other, and this and that. You make a connection, and then they open up to you, and they're willing to spend their time to help you make things happen. Because otherwise, other people throw up their hands and say, "I'm not dealing with that person." And my whole career, I've been given those people to work with. And like Ellen said, you find a connection with them, and you run with it, and you get good results as at the end, because that benefits everyone.
So Tim, what does that say about the rest of us? You've been given all of us to deal with.
I told you I've got sucker written across my forehead. But yeah, I don't know if the audience doesn't realize this, but when I was the chapter president, like half of my staff is here on this call right now.
Yeah.
Because Ellen was my treasurer, and Karen was my secretary, and Danielle, who's on the call, she's my vice president. And I've worked with all you guys for the past 6 or 8 years in various roles. So
I was
you
going
guys
to
are
add
not
to this.
problematic. Not you. You guys are wonderful.
And when you were president, I was on the board.
Were you?
Yeah.
I thought you preceded me, but yeah.
No, I was on the board of STC.
Right. Yeah. But I didn't realize there was an overlap there. I thought you were on the board before I became president, but that's okay.
2009 to 2012.
Yeah, I was president in 2016. So
Oh.
like
Never mind.
Okay.
I've only been not doing that for 3 years now.
I wanted to look at some of those questions on the site about breaking in. When I graduated,
actually, real quick, Lori, I think we have some other answers for the first question, and then I'll read out the questions from the chat. So, did you have a response to the first one, which was what's the most challenging thing about technical communication? I think I don't hear you.
Lori, she's asking you a question.
Oh, I didn't.
Sorry.
Yeah, I thought the others had answered that. Well,
No, I mean, you don't have to answer. Okay. Does anyone else have a response to that before I go on to the next one?
I was going to say one thing I really struggled with, and I mentioned it on the slide, I forgot to say. So I was voluntold into the position of tech writer, is the term I like to use, because our properly trained tech writer left for another company. And so they said, Matt, you do stuff. You do this now. And I really went into it sort of kicking and screaming for about 3 to 4 months, and insisted that they hire a proper tech writer. And then my wife actually pointed out to me, hey, I think you actually like this. And I realized I did, but I realized also other people in my company did not value my work, or didn't see the value in my work. And so it took me a long time to figure out how to legitimize my role as a technical communicator and the value it has for users. And like one of the big ones was, I think Tim mentioned that that person with the weird personality, or the difficult personality, and that happened to be the director of support at one of my companies. Just grumpy, I guess, is maybe the word you would use, which is sort of not the person you would expect to be head of customer support, but he must have saved all the goodness for the customer calls. I'm not sure, but I realized like I could legitimize my role with him by showing like how many cases are diverted with documentation, right? Once I could speak his language, then all of a sudden I have, oh, hey, when tech support people are free, they can help Matt write some more documentation. And the same with, other business value, being able to trace my work against business value, either dollars saved, dollars earned. Another one I found was like talking to our sales staff and figuring out which big sales that they made, did they use documentation with the client to make that sale, to show we have this feature set. So finding the ways to, not only just be like recognized, but also have people see, oh, my work is critical for our success. That was really difficult, especially since I just don't like business stuff. So having to learn to speak that way I found it to be vital.
Okay. So the next question we have is, do you have any advice for new grads with degrees in English or tips for breaking into the tech comm field?
I have some information about that. Actually, all of the tech writers who have worked for me have degrees in English. They didn't have technical background specifically, or if at all, and managed to get jobs with tech companies. I don't even think they ever took tech comm classes, because actually back then they probably didn't have tech comm classes when they were in college, but they just kind of fell into it.
Lori, I think you had an answer for this one as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when I graduated, there was no such thing as tech comm as a job, but I backed into it by what I was doing and then fixing stuff and pointing out how, you know, something wasn't clear. Would you think about saying it this way? Working with folks who were doing other things and helping them improve their jobs. And that's how I kind of broke into technical communication. So don't say no to any opportunity.
Okay.
Another thing to add to that is getting involved in STC or other professional organizations to learn more skills that are specific to tech comm, and to meet people who you can talk to and pick their brains is an excellent idea if that's where you want to go with your career. Volunteering in the organization will help you learn new skills. You could do anything from writing newsletters to working on the competitions and things like that, where you learn tech comm skills specifically.
Not to mention some web opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Yeah, and I was going to say
Another-
that I feel like now there are opportunities if you have an English degree, but just at this point in time, you're bound to have more technical chops than many of us did back in the day, because it wasn't that widespread, it wasn't that common. So if you have an English degree, you don't have any hard experience, you have opportunities to do things like, you know, you're writing a blog, or you have a personal website, you know, any of those projects that you either do yourself or you volunteer for some organization with their website. The meaning of tech comm encompasses all of that. So no matter what your degree is, if you just find opportunities to do those things, obviously our type of work is very portfolio based. So you want to build up those things that you can point to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, speaking of portfolio, I was going to mention, I know Google is doing, what is it, Season of Docs, where you can get sort of a paid stipend for doing documentation work within an open source project, which can be really intimidating. I have not done this, but it can be really difficult to step into a poorly documented open source project. But I think it's something like 90% of people in open source projects agree that documentation needs to be better, and something like 10% of people actually contribute to documentation. So there's huge potential there. I mean, you could have an incredible portfolio piece if you can say, I spent my 3 months of my summer documenting and building a whole documentation set for this open source project. And there is a evaluation process that Google does. So you would also have the ability to say, my work was approved by Google. That would be pretty amazing. Yeah, another opportunity is, I always recommend Write the Docs. They have an amazing Slack channel or Slack instance that I live on. There's channels on there for anything you could ever have a question on. So I always recommend that as well.
Okay. I think that segues well into the next question. Stevie, says that they have a writing background in journalism and PR for government agencies. Do I need to do some certification or training in technical communication to be a desirable candidate? And do you have any good recommendations on programs to look into?
I can say a little bit about this. I actually have, I went to grad school with someone who is a technical writer and specifically works on PR documentation and PR projects. And she was in the same graduate program at Drexel that I was in. So I would highly recommend the Drexel TechCom program. They cover a lot of ground, and you have opportunities for independent study as well. So if there's something specific that you want to investigate, you have opportunities to do that. STC also has their own certification program that you can get if you're interested in doing that. That will also help, especially if you don't have any experience in technical communication. But you don't have to specifically have had a job as a technical writer. There are lots of different job titles for different areas of tech comm, from marketing writers, copywriters, and things like that. So, you know, just you can look at the experiences that you have and see how you can frame them into how they relate to tech comm.
And if I may, I'd like to comment on the journalism, because that's kind of where I thought I was starting. And I think it's an excellent background for tech writing, because, you know, if you think about the inverted triangle of who, what, where, when, and how, it really forces you to be thoughtful and to break things down and decide what's important, what's less important. So journalism, I feel, is a strong background to lead into a tech writing, because it is fact-based writing. And you're in a sense, you're telling a story, not a fun story, but you have to tell a story in a way that a person, you know, understands. You're taking them from point A of not knowing something to point B of understanding.
That's an excellent analogy.
I have an addition to build on what was already said. So yeah, basically, don't be afraid to go outside of your comfort zone, learn something new, and network with other people. So someone mentioned, how do you learn XML? I bought a book on XML and kind of taught myself to it. And how does that apply to my job? Well, I taught myself HTML because it was a really boring job in that computer lab, and there was nothing to do in the summer. So I just coded a website, you know, in Notepad, just, you know, typing in everything manually, because that's what you had in 1997. And but if you learn a little bit of HTML, the XML works on the same basics. You know, it's the way you tag things. So if you get that fundamental, you can move into the next level fundamental. As long as you're willing to open up and learn new things, you know, well, I'm only majoring in this. Well, you're not. You're going to need to do this and this and this and this. You buy a house, all of a sudden you need to know electricity and plumbing and, you know, how to take care of whatever, your car. You didn't go to school for any of that stuff, but you pick this stuff up because you need to. So, you know, learn how to do whatever you want, whatever you see is happening. Like, I'd like to learn how to do some stuff with Python, because I think scripting would be a cool thing to get into. Do I have time to do that with the 35 committees I'm running and the board I'm on and my job and my 6-year-old son? And no, but I bought some books, and eventually, if anyone in my house ever falls asleep before midnight, I'll be able to look at them and actually do something before I pass out myself.
Another thing to look at is, I don't think it's been mentioned much except for Jira and Confluence, but be open to learning new tools, because every job you get, for some reason, it's never the same tool you used before. It's always something new. So you have to be good at learning new tools. So for instance, where I'm working now, they use AuthorIt. I had never used AuthorIt before. I had used FrameMaker. Of course, I knew, you know, how to code in HTML, because ISIL is what later became HTML, but I had never used AuthorIt. But through STC through this chapter, we had a one-day seminar on Author It. It was an introduction to Author It. It was a few releases before, but at least when I came in to do the interview, I had a clue. So always be open to learning new things. I think, building on what Tim was saying.
And
Another thing I was
to take that another step farther, just real quickly, if you see a posting that you're thinking about applying to, but they're talking about a tool you don't yet use, that should not stop you from applying. Having been on the hiring side quite a bit, the lack of a specific tool is pretty low on my list in terms of evaluating someone. What Lori just described is the interest and the willingness and the ability to learn a new tool. You're going to be good.
Yeah, if you are working with, say, an online help system, you can learn RoboHelp, you can learn MadCap, you can learn Author It. They're all a little different, but they're all doing pretty much the same thing. So if you have the skills to say, I can take complicated content from the grumpy developer guy with a magic card collection and turn that into something that everyone else can manage to read, it doesn't matter what tool you're using it in. It's all your skill in actually transforming that. The tool is just the icing on the cake and the structure. So you need to know how to be adaptive to whatever. Like I've been using RoboHelp, but I could use MadCap, and I'm pretty sure I could use Author It. And if you don't, most of them offer a free download for a trial for a month. Oh, this company is using this tool. Download the thing, say, oh, look, I made a little sample, whatchamacallit here. This, it's a basic thing, but I know how to do it. There you go. You just taught yourself how to do something.
Another opportunity is, at this point, like, technical communication isn't just writing documentation. So another area that I see a lot of people branching into is UI text writing, whether it's a lot of UI text or just a little bit. As someone who writes documentation, I remember having to document around a really bad UI so many times that I just asked, hey, could I just write some UI text and try to fix the problem, ahead of time. Now, if you're not a UI designer, right, you're not building the UI, there's only so much you can fix with words, but that can be a really powerful example, especially on a resume, if you have done any of that. Now, if you're thinking, okay, well, I'm not on a software development team, so how could I do that? If you have an app on your phone where you just find some experiences very frustrating, get yourself a WordPress blog or Medium blog. Those present really well, and go through the app and write down, what would you say? How would you change the experience? How would you rewrite the text there to better explain to users what's happening there? Not only would that be a great piece to show, but also the person interviewing you can sort of run through your thought process, kind of like when you show your work when you're working through a math problem. They can sort of see what you're thinking. So if you have no way, and I think you do, there's lots of ways to get proper, some tech writing out there, you can just make your own problem, document your own thing. I think you can be pretty creative, and I know I certainly was on some of the things I put on my resume in the past.
I would like to add to Matt, very, very good summation there. Usability is something that goes hand in hand with documentation for some reason. I think there's something, and this is a general statement, that the grumpy guy with the magic card, he's not really good at creating good labels, good error messages, and putting the buttons on the screen in the right order for the end user. Mm-hmm. And across multiple companies and multiple jobs and multiple developers, they turn this stuff in, and I'm like, this isn't even a complete sentence. You didn't have a verb in the message. Like, do you understand punctuation? And you spelled things wrong. And you put the fields over here. Why is that over there? Why is it not standard with this one? Because they often don't think about it. They say, oh, I've got a table in the database, and the database table is called is action. So my field label is called is action. I'm like, but that's not a label. You can't just name it after the database field. Well, all of the checkboxes are called is action.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yes, it's a skill set that in my mind goes very closely with documentation. So that's it.
I just had one more quick thing to add about the programs and stuff like that. You don't necessarily have to enter a degree program in technical communication. If you want to take a class here or there, since you've already, graduated, in your spare time to learn some specific tech comm skills, that shows initiative and interest, and will give you some of the skills that that you might need, or at least help you tweak the skills that you already have. So that's another thing to consider too. It doesn't have to be at a university. It could be an STC class. There are many STC classes that they have that run more than just one day. They run, once a week for a couple of months, and so there's lots of different options.
Mm-hmm. And I think that you covered a lot of this kind of stuff, but someone had a follow-up to the question: are there any particular skills you recommend getting some kind of certificate or tangible "I'm good at this" thing on a resume? But I think you guys mentioned a lot of great ideas about building a portfolio. If you don't know something, get a free trial and throw something together. Is there anything else that you recommend besides like taking a course, like any kind of certifications or anything like that? Guessing no.
I have, I think, a really great course that's very accessible. Google just released, I think it's just Technical Writing 1 and Technical Writing 2. They're just totally available online materials. I think the first one took maybe an hour to move through, the second one maybe an hour and a half. The intention with their curriculum is there's also like a group lecture component to it, but I think with the beginning of 2020 being so difficult for all of us, that was sort of sidelined. But you can very easily move through those two courses, and it's also looks great on a resume to say I've been through Google's Technical Writing 1 and 2 course, and those are the courses they use at Google to teach all the engineers their technical writing. So the content is really great.
Okay. So another question: how is your work-life balance? How much stress do you experience on the job? And do you feel like you get enough time to do a good job at work?
I know in my job, there are certainly times when we're getting ready to launch a new product or something, and everybody's working like crazy. But generally, in the jobs that I've had, that's not the everyday situation. It's more special circumstances. So my work-life balance has always been good. I don't have a lot of stress, and haven't in my past jobs. So generally, there's never enough time you never get enough time that you want to do the job perfectly. But most of the time, perfection isn't necessary. And so as long as you get your communication for the user so that they can use it, you don't have to really worry about being perfect. You just you kind of have to balance the quality with the time with the cost. You've got that triad of trying to balance work there.
I would certainly agree. And I mean, it's varied, maybe some by company, but I think the peaks are few and far between. And for the most part, you have a lot of freedom in how you manage your time and how do you get from here to the release date 2 months from now.
Yeah, and time management skills are really important. So a lot of that is based on how well you manage your time and how well you can prioritize. But then you can take classes for that as well, too, if you're struggling with that.
I would like to, go ahead,
And
Laura.
never be afraid to leave a job. I had one where I started as a contractor and they hired me, and my manager just seemed to turn on a dime the moment I became an employee. And it was really rough. She wouldn't let me get my work done. There was all kinds of issues, this, that, and the other thing. I started looking around for my next position, and I actually ended up quitting that job before she fired me. I'm sure she was planning on it because she was interfering with my interviewing. Thank you.
I forgot I was going to say now.
I'm sorry, Tim.
My mind has been erased. Oh, it was what was the question? Free time? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, I remember. It depends on who your manager is too, and how supportive they are of what you're doing, which builds on what Lori said as well. So at my old job, everyone got there were rounds of layoffs, and at one point, everyone got laid off, and then I got hired back, and I was reporting not to my old boss because she got laid off too. Later went on to hire Ellen, I think. And I was reporting to a dev manager, and he knew nothing about what my team had been doing. And he would try and micromanage us. He'd say, okay, you need, and I'd say, well, why? We have 3 months for the release, and I can do these in any order. It doesn't matter. And well, why didn't you get this one done? Because the developer didn't finish coding it yet. That's why I didn't get it done. Or the developer was on vacation and no one understands what they did because they didn't document anything yet. And he was completely unreliable as someone to report to. And that made a much more stressful environment. And now I've been in an environment where I'm trusted with what I can do. And as long as I get my work done and I get it done well in the time frame, everything's fine. And there are periods of stress, like right now we have a release that's going out in, I think, the first week of December. And as the doc person, I have to assemble all 15 of those documents and print them and put them in that library and create a new library to put them in and finish the help and build the help and check it in. It's a big, long list that all has to be done at the last minute because it's contingent upon everyone else finishing their work first. So it's like, oh, I'd like to take off next week prior to Thanksgiving, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. But in theory, after this release goes out, I'll have a little bit of breather before the next release goes out in the next quarter.
Yeah, speaking of releases, I think that's been my experience. A lot of the time, I have not had issues with work-life balance, at least in my technical writing role, not so much in other companies that I've worked for. But I remember a period where the company was in pretty rough financial states, and it was basically like, okay, everybody's working 80-hour weeks to turn out a bunch of product features really, really quickly, which never really proves to be successful, but I think companies keep trying to do that. But as my role as the technical writer, and I was kind of also doing Scrum Master work, I really felt like I needed to be as involved and helpful as possible. So even in situations where it was like, okay, I can't document this yet, that's where I started the practice of like writing documentation fiction. So writing documentation about a thing that doesn't exist yet, but you're pretty sure you know what it'll be like. And then also that's where I started offering help with UI text writing, just to be in there with my Agile team, supporting them, even though I couldn't help write a lick of Java code. I was still there to support them. I think that was really huge. And then moving from there, release periods were stressful for a while, but it got better at like doing documentation within the Agile process, so there was less of that. But I think there's a level of empathy that you should have for the team or teams that you work with if they are, if they're in a high stress time, at least be aware of that and see how you can help them with that. But then also, right, you have to protect your personal life as well. So make sure your people aren't suffering for that.
Okay, so here's a good question. Everyone touched on their roles within STC. Could you share your favorite part about being a member of STC?
The people.
For me, it's the people.
Thanks. Sharon and I like
Pinky
each
swear.
other. Sharon and I traveled to conference together one year.
Yes, we did. We had a great time.
Yeah, so we people, and not just for the professional networking aspect. They're just genuinely nice, interesting people.
Yeah, I was going to say the networking too. I used to go to the annual conference, and I developed, having lived up and down the East Coast too, I have a lot of friendships with people from all over the country and even outside of the country that it was great just to be able to see them once a year. And that connection. I am not an introvert.
So I would like to say that yes, it's the people. I also have this weird sense of satisfaction of helping people, which is, I guess, what the job is inherently about. But through STC, you can volunteer with so many different things. I mean, I chaired and have been on, I don't know, a dozen different committees throughout STC as well as at the chapter level. You get to meet people, you make connections all over the world. I'm at the point where I know someone from Australia, and when she comes to the STC conference, she brings me Tim Tams and I swap her some tasty cakes. And
Otherwise known as Kirsty.
It's Kirsty, yes. I'm not the only person she does that for, but I also have a contingent of people in Texas that bring me various Texas foods. And
Wow.
basically, anyone will trade things for tasty cakes, is what I've learned. So it's kind of neat that I have these connections all over the world at this point, and then I get to help. You know, it's a goal. You want to do something good and improve whatever's there. One of the things I like to do is figure out what a process is in an organization or a group and improve upon that process. Where is it failing? Why is it failing? How can we make it work better? And that's something that I like to do with the volunteers. Oh, here's this committee and it didn't work last year. Let me rearrange this, upgrade this, change this around, get a better flow. And that's very satisfying.
Okay. Next question. Any advice for someone who wants to freelance?
That's a Danielle question.
Yeah, I'm not. I've never done freelance.
I did freelance work. I did contract work for a long time, from the late 80s until 2002. And I have to say that being in the network was great, because if somebody needed an editor, they knew I was available. They would give me a project. I did some work for a store, Belk stores in Charlotte, North Carolina. And one thing that people used to say when I went in as a contractor, that I would get I'm not an introvert, I'm an extrovert. I get friendly with the rest of the team. And several times I've been offered a full-time job because of that, being part of the team. But other than that, even if there wasn't a position for me, people would even say to me, it's great working with you because you just become part of us. So if you're doing some contract work, become part of the team. Don't be afraid to do that, and open yourself, and also network. I did get one job at the job I had at CA, where a friend of mine was walking down the street in New York and was talking to other friends about people she knew that were looking for jobs. And she mentioned, I have a friend who's looking for technical writing job. A perfect stranger stopped her and said, did I hear you say you knew somebody who wants to be a technical writer? And that turned out to be my contract at CA. She got his phone number and I called him, and it all worked out. So, you know, if you want to do contract work, let everybody know. It's not a secret.
Yeah, since everyone was like, Danielle knows about that sort of stuff, I just popped in. So to those who don't know me, I'm Danielle Villegas. I'm the immediate past president of the chapter. You know, Jen has inherited, you know, the legacy from me, and I inherited it from Tim. And currently I'm not only the immediate past president, but I'm also working on the STC at the society level for the Community Affairs Committee and the Education Committee. As far as freelancing, as Lori said, there's no harm in doing contracting. To be honest, I've been looking for a full-time job for 10 years. I have yet to find one. One of the things about this industry, at least where I live in central New Jersey, is it's very hard to find a full-time job. A lot of people are able to find it, but not everybody. And so my philosophy was, well, a job, even if it's for 6 months, 3 months, a year, is better than no job. To kind of back up what everybody else has said throughout the evening, each contract that I've taken has always been an opportunity to learn a new skill or build upon a new skill. The idea of, as has been said, if I know FrameMaker, I can probably figure out AuthorIt or Badcap. For me, I've always been in content management and content strategy. So for me, if I could figure out, my career started out more with Franken systems, as I like to call them, custom systems, before actual content management systems came around. But that led into being able to use SharePoint, or some of the others, and even some of those, even if you have one of those out of the box like SharePoint systems, every company customizes it to their liking. So in some cases, if you have that foundation, you're good. For freelancing, don't say no to those jobs. Sometimes those, as Lori said, sometimes they can segue into a full-time job. Sometimes they're just great opportunity to say, let me try that out. I think I can do some of that. They've got some other skill I can learn. And then you might find after 6 months, no, I don't like that. So you can kind of get out easily with no harm, no foul sort of a thing, and just kind of stick it out and look for the next thing. So it really varies, from job to job. But I mean, I've done everything from UX writing, content management, content strategy. I think the contract I'm in right now is the first time I've actually had a technical writer job. So, and this is over like 10 years. So, don't keep your mind just focused on one thing. Keep your options open. I think everybody has said that. So I could just echo a lot of what the speakers have said. And it's freelancing. Like I said, it could be through a recruiter. And through STC, just even this past year when I was trying to look for full-time contract work, I was able to get some small little things through networking. Somebody through STC said, instructional design stuff, right? And I said, yeah. I said, okay, I need you for like 2 weeks to help me write up something. And I'm like, okay. And it was a huge project for a state agency, a very large state on the West Coast. For their DMV project. So it was big, and we got a lot done, and it paid well. But it's something I can put on my resume. Even those short little 2-week things you can put down on your resume, it's something effective. So don't leave anything out. I think that's enough of me talking. I'll let you guys take it back, because I could go on forever. I'm the other extrovert here.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say about resumes, since you brought that up, one of the ways I handled having those multitude of contracts is I put them in one lump area, so it didn't look like I was changing jobs every 6 weeks. And I listed not all the particular places, but the particular skills that were needed for each, as this is my contracting experience. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I'm actually a freelancer, so I'll contribute something. I'm not one of the presenters, but it's important to have a portfolio where you can show what you can do, because people who are looking for freelancers like to see that. And if you don't have a portfolio, you can build one up getting volunteer jobs, or just, like Matt said, finding a problem somewhere and coming up with a solution for it through technical communication. Upwork is a good place to find like a short gig here and there that may not pay a lot, but can get you something to put on your portfolio. I did a lot of that when I was just starting out. And what Lori said also, I do the same thing with my resume for all my freelance and contract jobs. I have a section for freelance writer, and then I list the projects that I worked on. And for which companies, and a little brief summary of what it was. So yeah, it doesn't look like you're jumping from job to job, but today in what they call the gig economy, that's not so unusual anymore. A lot of people are ending up doing that, especially in our field. And the other thing I would suggest is LinkedIn has been really helpful for me. not specifically using their job search, but if you just look through the posts and look for certain keywords, a lot of times you can find recruiters or HR people in there who are just posting contract jobs, and you can just comment and say, hey, I'm interested, and send them your resume. And I found a lot of like short-term contracts that way. All right. So the next, oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna mention my wife for a while was a freelance graphic designer, and one thing she really struggled with was finding, negotiating price, because sometimes, like on Upwork, I think there's an element of sort of naming your price, having rates. That's really difficult, especially as a creator, to have to assign a monetary value to your work. And I heard someone share once, when I think she was also a graphic designer, she would, like, every 6 months evaluate herself, kind of like if she had a manager, and say, is my work worth what I'm charging for it? And if so, if I charged more for it, would my current clients continue to pay for it? And that was sort of her way of continuing to make sure her work was valued enough. And it takes a lot of confidence and skill to get there. And another tip that somebody shared with me, while I have not taken tech writing gigs before, I was really surprised by this. Someone made the mistake of taking a tech writing gig that had a requirement for words written per day, which they said was just, and it was a several year long, contractor position, but they said that was a huge mistake, just totally draining. Technical communication does not work that way. It's like paying engineers based on the lines of code they write. Like, better code typically has fewer lines in it. So same with the writing. So avoid that. If you see that they don't know what they want, you deserve better.
Run.
Yeah, run.
Just adding to that, STC also has a salary database. So if you go to stc.org, you can look that up and look at like average salaries for technical communicators. And if you need help coming up with like an hourly rate to use or something like that for a freelance gig, that's a really helpful tool.
And don't be afraid of doing 1099 contract work. It's great for taxes.
Okay. So Tim already answered this a little bit, but XML was brought up a lot. Does anyone else have any tips for learning about XML? No, okay, I guess not. I personally had a course through Northeastern University where I did my master's. They had a course on XML. But there's a lot of courses you can find online. Some of them are free. You could just get a book, like Tim said. That's really helpful, and just teach yourself. And it's good to come up with something to put on your portfolio so you can show people, hey, I know XML. Okay, let me see if we have any more questions.
It's fun to learn something new like that.
Mm-hmm.
I had to use Git for a different project at work with another group. And now my group is starting to use Git for source control. And then I became the person that knew the most about source control, more than the guy who's in charge of running our source control. So I was giving him tips, which was kind of like, hey, whoa, that's cool. Tim knows this stuff. He's just the writer. No, I know all those other things too. I might not code in Java, but you can learn anything.
All right. Also for coding, I do a lot of courses through Codecademy, which is either free or really affordable. So if you're interested in learning HTML or CSS or Java, those are great courses to use. So Ellen had to drop off, and I'm not seeing any more questions coming up on here. So I think we can close the webinar. I just have a couple of things. Reminders of things that we mentioned earlier. If you want to join STC, just go to stc.org and just make sure you select the Philadelphia Metro chapter. So you join our chapter and you get to be entered to win a $25 gift card if you do it before December 31st. If you're interested in volunteering for treasurer, or you just have questions or want to learn more about it, feel free to send me an email. president at
I'm happy to
STC.
help.
Yeah, Karen is very happy to help you learn the job and get started. So it's president at STC-PMC.org. You can also email me if you have more questions and you want to ask someone. We have a mentor program. If you're a member of STC, we can hook you up with a mentor who can help you out a lot. Ellen was my mentor and she was awesome. So that was really helpful for me. We have a lot of great resources. So I definitely recommend signing up for STC. We have a lot more programs coming up like this one. So keep an eye on our website and our social media, and we'll be posting them there. Okay, so thanks everyone for coming, and thanks to all of our speakers. Really appreciate it. It was really cool hearing all the different ways that people end up in tech writing or technical communication. So thanks a lot and have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.